Ready? Call the Board of Supervisors meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Any additions, deletions, or changes to the agenda that anybody has? Take a motion.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Agenda is approved. We don't have any special presentations or appearances, do we? Consent agenda.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Consent agenda is approved. New business. Award of the contract for street sign repair and replacement. Amanda Amos.
In front of you, we have a memo to award contract for street sign repair and replacement. On December 5th, a bid was released that was advertised on the county website, the RRU, and EVA. We received 4 responses. Staff recommends awarding a contract to DNS Construction. They were the lowest responsive bidder. DNS currently provides street sign repairs and replacements to the county.
Is that a, do we have specific signs to be repaired, or is that just one that's on call?
I believe this is at, like, on as needed basis.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
And I would like to make a motion on this due to some things we've experienced with the broadband authority. Need to check and make sure the certifications of this company to work in VDOT right-of-ways. I'd like to defer this until our following meeting, till such time staff can research and make sure that they are properly licensed to do so.
And in good standing
And in good standing.
with
yes.
VDOT.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. Second on that? Or any further discussion?
Just take no action probably, or you wanna?
Need to vote on the motion to defer it.
What's that?
Vote on the motion to defer.
So I have a motion to defer.
Right.
So moved then.
Second. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. All right, the other one, from Mrs. Simpson is the approval of agreement with the sheriff for the supervision of animal control.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, in front of you is an agreement between the Board of Supervisors and the sheriff regarding supervision of the animal control function. This is similar to other constitutional officer agreements that you have recently renewed. The only change in this agreement from the renewal 4 years ago is an increase in the monthly stipend amount to the sheriff. It's currently, or it was $1,000 in your previous version of the agreement, and it has been proposed to increase to $2,000. So approval of this agreement would authorize the monthly increase, but would simply extend the remainder of the terms for the new 4-year term of the sheriff.
Okay.
So moved.
Second?
Okay, just real quickly, something to note on this is that the number of animal control calls has tripled, gone through the roof from what it used to be, so there's quite a large amount of time and effort put in on this.
And to clarify, the agreement would become effective January 1st of this year.
Okay. All right, any further discussion? Okay, there was a motion on this,
And a second.
a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Very good, passes unanimously. All right, consideration of a resolution for equal taxing authority for counties. Ms. Simpson.
Yes, sir. if you'll recall, late last month, the Virginia Association of Counties presented what they called an advocacy toolkit to county officials in an effort to seek support of equal taxing authority for counties. It's been something that has been on legislative priorities for many years of VACO's program, but this year they highlighted it as one of their top priorities. So attached to the memo, I presented an infographic that VACO had prepared that had details on what they're considering the importance of leveling the playing field for counties as it relates to taxing authority. Also attached was a draft resolution, which VACO is requesting localities to adopt and submit to its elected officials for consideration during this current General Assembly session. I received interest from several board members to at least put this on an agenda for discussion, so that's what staff has prepared and is leaving it open for the board's discussion and direction.
Any comments?
Yeah, this is the kind of thing, we don't necessarily have to increase any of the taxes, but the fact that the state legislature somewhat ties our hands, I'd just like to get rid of those shackles.
Very good. Mr. White, Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, I mean, I think increasing the local authority in general is a good thing, especially when it comes to taxing. That doesn't mean that we're necessarily going to do any or all of these, as Lee said, but having the authority to address specific situations could be valuable.
Okay.
There's no good argument why a city should be treated differently than a county or vice versa.
Exactly. So, okay. Can I have a motion for this resolution?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Approved unanimously. All right. Old business, resolution for Juvenile and Domestic Relations Court Advisory Council. Ms. Straw.
Good evening, gentlemen. During our last meeting, I brought forth a recommendation from Judge Morris for your assistance in establishing a JDR advisory council. And at this time, I worked with the county attorney to draft a resolution for your consideration, and I have that attached. And I am here to just discuss next steps in any direction you would like me to take in assisting the judge with this project.
At this point, has he asked for anything more than this? from us?
I did call him Mr. Crozier because you wanted me to call him to make sure he understood there was no funding attached to it, and we had that discussion. And he responded that no, there's nothing else he necessarily wanted at this time. He said he was going to maybe try to write out a tentative draft of a vision, mission, goal that we could use when trying to recruit folks for this council, and then he would want me to bring that back to you all to make sure that you were comfortable with that before we went out and perhaps targeted some of those groups that I mentioned last time: the probation office, the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, services to abused families, Office on Youth, and folks of that nature.
Did you have any discussion with him about the numbers in the draft resolution? There are X's as placeholders now, but
I believe code says that the board is authorized up to 10, and he's authorized up to 5. But I don't necessarily know if there's restrictions on if it could be less or
It can be
more.
less.
Okay.
One of the things that we've had trouble filling one of the boards in terms of a family member on the citizens, whatever the one is for social services for
Right.
juvenile, and we've been trying to fill that for, I think, since I've been on the board, and I'm hoping that we don't have the same kind of problem. It's the type of people you want to get, and sometimes you want somebody who knows about juvenile problems or domestic problems, and trying to get somebody like that who's been through that onto a board is pretty important to really get a good functioning board. So hoping that we can get that kind of people.
Yes, so the judge had discussed with me perhaps trying to target professional folks who have, you know, a direct impact with the JDR court so that they could use it more as a educational tool to discuss ongoing trends and impacts in the community.
Yeah, maybe we could use this as an opportunity to maybe put something on our revamped website for citizen interest on boards and commissions. That maybe we could put something there, what's available, or if you're interested in the future. You know, and it would have to be, you know,
Actually, that's a good idea. I mean, there's another empty slots on various commissions and boards.
and it's harder and harder
And
to fill.
something that would say, are you interested in this? And, because somebody doesn't necessarily go looking for for boards and commissions, and you're out recruiting, and maybe this would help recruiting.
And maybe our esteemed newsman could, assist with the, Orange Review and putting the word out. The world-renowned paper that he puts out.
It's a partnership.
That's right.
In terms of the language, it says the Citizen Advisory Council shall contain X members, and I'm wondering, should we give ourselves a little bit of room and to say up to, because one could read that if you don't have exactly X, then you don't have a
quorum.
you don't have a quorum, and you don't have an advisory council. I mean, I don't most necessarily like the language that says up to, but I guess I'll ask the county attorney, is there
No, there's
any
no, I mean, this
danger
isn't-
there or any issue with that?
Well, this isn't the type of entity that's gonna take action or do anything, so if only 6 people show up, it doesn't matter, or 5 people show up.
Nobody like the epic.
I mean, I didn't plug it in there, but my suggestion would be 10. That puts an onus of 5 on us and 5 on the judge. And again, remember this, the whole point of this is to help the JDR court, to give them advice on programs and procedures that they're using. So, you know, I put the X's, but, you know, if you're asking me, I'd say 10's a good number, because then it gives 5 to the judge and 5 to us.
Should we not, though, include the numbers? I mean, you
Well,
see any reason for not
If you're
to?
gonna adopt this tonight, then we just say
Better put
that
the numbers in.
Yeah.
we just say the X's are replaced with 10.
10 and 5 and 5.
10, 5, and 5.
Or I can come back to you with the,
No, that, I'm fine.
Okay. Is there a second on the numbers?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously.
thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next, we have the appointment of the clerk, Ms. Simpson.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, during your organizational meeting, one of the matters of business is to appoint clerk to the board and chief deputy clerk. You took action at your last meeting to appoint your chief deputy clerk, and it was requested to bring this matter forward for appointment of clerk at this meeting, following you having appointed an interim county administrator. And that's the resolution that's before you this evening.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. Now, you're stuck with us for a while now.
Or
Okay.
vice versa.
Well, either way, I think it might be a fair toss-up. All right, the zoning administrator appointments. Mrs. Gordon?
Yes, gentlemen, as you know, Brian David had a planning background, and he served as your zoning administrator, subdivision agent, and other things for which I do not have the background and the training and the certifications. So we have spoken with Ms. Thornton, and she's graciously agreed to be appointed as your zoning administrator and subdivision agent, should you so desire. And there is a resolution in your packet to that effect.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, just one quick comment on this. I regret if we have caused anyone any inconvenience or any undue harm by not having an agent for a short period of time, but it was in the best interest of the county. Any further comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously.
Congratulations. I think.
And now you're stuck with us. Okay, the county administrator appointments, Ms. Simpson.
Yes, finishing up the matter of appointments, the memo that I provided contained a list of appointments that were held by the previous county administrator. You'll notice on the top of the list that the clerk of the board, zoning administrator, and subdivision agent have now been addressed under separate items on the agenda. But that does leave the erosion and sediment control administrator, the local board of social services, Central Virginia Partnership for Economic Development, Rappahannock-Rapidan Regional Commission, and the Thomas Jefferson Area Community Criminal Justice Services Board, with vacancies. I'm simply providing this list to the board and letting you know that it would be appropriate for you to consider these appointments between now and the time that you appoint your next county administrator, but opening it up for your discussion and direction.
And I would point out also in this list, the ENS control administrator, is a certified, position that has to be, you have to be certified through the state, so I can't do that one either.
Right, and that's something we will be discussing,
Right.
at later time, so, thank you very much. Okay, any other discussion, comments?
So is the intention to,
We would not be including the erosion and sediment control.
would the intention be to, that the other four would be handled by Ms. Gard? Okay.
Any further discussion? Okay,
Well, you need to make the.
You need a
appointment.
motion and
I would make a motion to appoint her to the local board of social services, Central Virginia Partnership, Rappahannock-Rapidan Regional Commission, and the Thomas Jefferson Area Community Criminal Justice.
thank you. Second?
Yes.
Could I clarify something on that?
Sure.
I'm not being appointed to the local board of social services. Your county administrator
It
is your
the
local
local
board.
board.
Yes,
Okay.
so not appointed to, but appointed as.
Appointed as for that one.
All right, add.
That's what I seconded.
Okay,
I thought you did.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. All right, no director of constitutional reports this evening. County attorney's report.
No report, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Latchney, we need to request the board schedule the public hearing for the tax relief that we
Oh,
previously
yeah,
discussed.
yeah, sorry, we already did it. As you recall, the Commissioner of Revenue came and requested that you make adjustments on the tax relief. You said that was okay, but we actually have to turn it into an ordinance. So I drafted up the ordinance to reflect the new numbers and took it upon myself to instruct staff it was okay to go ahead and advertise, and I'm hoping you'll ratify what I instructed staff
So
to
ratified.
do.
And that is for what date for the public?
That
hearing?
is for Tuesday, February 11th at 7:00 PM.
Okay. Have a motion, a second?
Moved.
I don't know. What will happen if we don't do that?
The ad's still going in the paper, I think we already did it.
Great problems for the Commissioner of Revenue and the Treasurer.
County attorney?
And maybe the county
The
attorney.
county attorney. Which actually brings us to a secondary issue. I don't know if you want to discuss it right now. Most counties don't get board approval to schedule public hearings. For example, if planning staff has public hearings, I mean, typically, this is not done. So something we may want to consider is a discussion on that as to whether it's an efficient way to make things happen by having to have a meeting to schedule the public hearing, which bumps typically everything out at least 2 weeks. And actually usually more because of the advertising requirements.
Okay.
Does our bylaws instruct us to do it that way, or what's the basis that we've, other than precedent?
Because we've always done it, I've been here 7 years, that's how we've always done it.
Well, I think for the present time, we need to leave it alone. There may be a time when we can look at it and maybe perhaps make a change there. But I think it grew out of situations where public hearings were advertised that the board actually didn't want to deal with at that point, but once it's advertised, then you're Yeah, I don't, this is not I don't think this is a major problem.
It's not a pressing problem, it just occasionally we have something that's perhaps a little more time sensitive. And it doesn't happen often. This commissioner thing was time sensitive because of the way she's doing our taxes and doing all of that,
Yep.
so.
All right, with that being said, did we have a second on that?
We did.
Okay, all in favor?
I caught a motion, but not a second.
Oh, I seconded it.
Okay, great.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, passes unanimously. All right, now to the county administrator's report. Ms.
I
Gordon.
don't have anything to report.
Good answer.
Perfect answer.
Board comment. Mr. White.
No comment. I've said my,
Oh, okay.
Are you trying to drag this out?
No, well, actually, yeah, we have a few minutes before.
We have a long closed session, so it may work out.
So, okay, one thing I would just like to mention, we've been dealing with VDOT on the Route 3, Route 20 intersection ever since they made the improvements, and created copious amounts of work for body shops and tow companies.
Keeping the economy moving?
Yes, keeping the economy moving. Been working with VDOT since before Christmas, asking them to turn the westbound lane into a green or a red light for the turn lane. They finally came back yesterday and said, oh, we did a traffic study. Sure enough, accidents are up, and it's during the peak hours. So I believe the times are
I think it was like until,
it was 6:30 to 8:30 in the morning,
and then
then
maybe 3 to
3 to 8
something
in the afternoon.
afternoon.
So it will be a red and a green light during the peak hours, which is when the majority of the accidents have occurred. And Mr. Poole, if you would like, I believe that the deputy clerk can provide you with the official hours. Any other board comment? All right, informational items, any questions? Okay. Appointments to boards, commissions, and committees.
I have an appointment to the EDA for the town of Gordonsville. The town has recommended Sharon Hujic, and so I agree with that appointment and present it to the board. This is to replace Maggie Samra.
Okay. Very good, any others? Okay, all in favor of,
Sharon Hujic.
thank you, appointment?
aye.
Aye.
Okay, very good. All right, on calendar items, we scheduled that public hearing, correct? Okay, any other question on calendar?
You have a request to schedule an additional meeting, your annual meeting with Virginia Cooperative Extension Office.
Yes, for the 25th of February,
So that's our second meeting, correct?
Yes, sir.
yes. Any issues with that?
No.
All right. We'll schedule that for the 25th at 6 p.m. All right. Guess we will recess for 5 minutes. And then come back for the public hearing. Public comment, rather.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman?
Man, you're sleeping over there.
We gotta
may
repeat
have
that
to
now.
reconsider this appointment. All right. Public comment period is closed. I would ask the county attorney to read the paperwork.
Whereas the Board of Supervisors of Powhatan County desires
No,
to.
it's Orange County,
Orange County.
That too.
I'm half
Two
to it.
strikes.
I used the wrong computer program. Desires to discuss in closed meeting the following matters: discussion, consideration, or interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific public officers or appointees or employees of any public body concerning the county administrator, planning, erosion and sediment control, and economic development. Consultation with legal counsel pertaining to actual or probable litigation where such consultation in open meeting would adversely affect the negotiating or litigating posture of the public body concerning S-power and copyright infringement. In consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by the public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel concerning bonds. And whereas pursuant to sections 2.2, 37, A1, A7, and A8 of the Code of Virginia, such discussions may occur in closed meeting. Now therefore be resolved by the Board of Supervisors of Orange County that authorizes discussion of the forestated matters in closed meeting. Need that as a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
A lot more work for him these days now.
Yes, indeed.
Ready?
You would
Yes, sir.
give the information and bring us out of close, please?
Members of the board, to the best of your knowledge, were the only matters discussed in the closed meeting, public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements, and that only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting. Mr. White,
Aye.
Mr. Crozier,
Aye.
Mr. Frame,
Aye.
Mr. Goodwin's absent, and Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
All right. At this point, we will proceed with our public hearings. Hearing number one is ZTA 1904, expansion of nonconformities in a business district. Sandra, would you like to give us a little background?
An agricultural district.
This matter was presented to the Planning Commission at their hearing on January 2nd by Brian David on your behalf. And the proposal is to amend section 70-244A, expansion or enlargement of nonconformities, to add verbiage that would allow the potential expansion of an existing residential or non-residential structure by 1,500 square feet or 25%, whichever is greater. At the Planning Commission's hearing, Mr. Chris Schaefer of Unionville spoke in support of the proposed text amendment. There was no other public comment. The commission did vote 4-1 to recommend to your approval. Commissioner Patel was concerned about the potential for allowing a proportionately much larger addition to a very small structure, but that was really the extent of the Planning Commission's discussion of the matter.
Okay. Any questions for Ms. Thornton? Thank you very much. All right. Open the public hearing. We have anyone signed up to speak?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Close the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, as the instigator for this, because of some issues that several constituents had, this is really trying to, without upsetting the apple cart, try to address situations where the original structure is so small that under the current conditions, it wouldn't even make sense to even, if you have a 1,000 square foot house, then you can add 250 square feet, and that's hardly worth the trouble. In one instance, it's actually a small church that wants to add, strangely enough, they want to have actual indoor plumbing there, and have perhaps a small, I forget what they call it, fellowship hall, I believe is the word, the term. So the idea, rather than going in and just raising the percentage, that we would say you can do it up to 50%, or 1,500 square feet. Now, so that allows on a smaller structure that could go up to 1,500 square feet. Somewhere the intent was lost a little bit, and I'd like to make a correction in the wording so that it reads because as it reads now, it says enlargement of a residential or non-residential structure, so that, put those together, that adds up to everything, and the intent was more along these lines, enlargement of a residential or other non-commercial structure. So the idea was to allow churches and things of that nature, and there's probably some other things, but it would not affect commercial, so it wouldn't affect, convenience stores or tire stores or anything like that.
All right, would you like to make a motion?
So I make a motion that we, approve with that, correction.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Let's see, we need a roll call on this?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you go ahead and do the roll call vote.
Sure. Mr. Frame,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Crozier,
Aye.
Mr. Goodwin is absent, and Mr. White,
Aye.
4-0.
Very good. All right, Ms. Thornton, if you come up for ZTA 19-05, administrative variances.
This matter was also presented by Mr. David to the Planning Commission, and the proposal, is to bring the, county's regulations into greater conformance with the Code of Virginia. The revision would allow the zoning administrator to approve administrative variances for facilities intended to benefit, someone who, qualifies, under the Americans with Disabilities Act, federal or state programs. And the, intent is that the facility or the improvement that is installed would remain in place until such time as there was no longer a documented need for that, improvement. The Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend approval to you.
Okay. Any questions from Ms. Thornton? Thank you very much. Okay. Open the public hearing. Anyone signed up to speak?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Close the public hearing.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? I do know that this comes into effect mainly in, our subdivisions that have small lots and the houses are built right on the, building restriction lines, and it creates a hardship, so this is one that definitely needed, some adjustment. Okay, go ahead and take the roll call now.
Sure. Mr. Crozier,
Aye?
Mr. Frame,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. White,
Aye.
and Mr. Goodwin's absent. It's 4-0.
Okay. And then, I guess this one, actually, the ZTA 19-06, the Barbersville Village Overlay District. I guess, Ms. Thornton, you wanna come up and talk about that one, or, I'm not sure exactly who to,
That was another one of mine. There simply is, several people who are interested in serving on it, and we run out of spaces, and because it's an advisory, committee, I didn't see any harm in having more advisors, and so, but because we had actually put this in the, it was the ordinance, we need to go through this to change it.
have anything else that you'd like to say?
No, I would just say that there was no public comment offered at the Planning Commission's public hearing, and the commission, voted unanimously to recommend, approval.
Okay, very good, thank you. All right, open the public hearing, anyone signed up to speak?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Close the public hearing.
Move to approve.
Okay,
Second.
any other board comment? All right, Ms. Simpson?
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Goodwin is absent. Mr. White,
Aye.
Mr. Crozier,
Aye.
and Mr. Frame.
Lee?
Oh. Aye. Sorry. I was looking at
4-0.
the next one already.
Yep, okay, very good. All right, our next public hearing is SUP 19-05, Thornburn, the Icebox Creamery. Mrs. Thornton?
and Jill Thorburn submitted an application for a special use permit to operate the Icebox Creamery, which is a seasonal business on the property of the Lake of the Woods Car Wash, where they have been operating a temporary ice cream business for the last 4 seasons. It's their desire to operate for longer during the year, weather permitting, but also to install a permanent structure that they wouldn't have to move at the end of each season. So we did not have a use that in our current zoning regulations that fit that well, so they have applied under the provision that any other use that's not specifically enumerated in the commercial general district. The car wash business, as you might remember, was the subject of a special use permit that was approved in 1998 with some conditions. There was no public comment offered at the Planning Commission's hearing. The planning commissioners did have some discussion about concerns related to potential conflicts between pedestrians visiting the site to, for ice cream, and the car wash traffic. There was also a bit of concern expressed about potential, I guess I would say, conflict between pedestrians and traffic on Route 3. There is ample space on the property for parking to serve the somewhat expanded ice creamery, and one of the proposed conditions would require delineation of parking spaces. Right now, there's pavement, but it's not marked, so we would recommend that they be required to delineate the parking spaces, required parking spaces, as well as pedestrian walkways.
Out of curiosity, what is the defined delineation? Is it lines on the asphalt, or is it pylons with chains?
We may need to clarify that. Well, I think, I was thinking paint, but that would need to be clarified.
I would, okay, yeah, because I'd have a concern, delineation, that's the only concern I have, is that we may need to look at that, because lines on the asphalt really don't mean anything. You can tell every day we drive up and down the road that they really don't mean anything to people anymore. But applicants here?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions from this point? Okay, thank you. Thorburns, if you'd like to come up, if you have anything to say, and then if we have any questions.
Regarding the lines for the parking?
Well, no, anything, the lines for the parking or anything else?
Oh, okay. Well, we've been operating the Icebox Creamery as a temporary trailer for the last 4 years, and we've grown, and customers ask us, oh, please don't close for end of September, please stay open longer. You know, October's a warm month sometimes, and so March can be warm too, and we have a 6-month time frame that we can only be open. So our interest is to open early in March, close late October, early November, depending on the weather. It'll be a 12 by 24 building set on a pad with a retaining wall. We'll be fencing in the entire thing for safety reasons. So it'll be an eating area on the side, fenced in, and we will be painting lines for parking on the parking lots.
So
I think that's on our.
So the pedestrian area is really just going from their cars into the fenced-in area?
Yes, sir.
That's my only concern. Okay.
How many spaces are you anticipating identifying, parking spaces? I didn't see anything that gave me a number,
I
but
just want to make sure I give you the right answer. According to our measurements and talking to the parking we should be able to provide 10 parking
Oh,
spots.
okay.
One being a handicap.
Any other questions from the board? Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Open the public hearing. Have anyone signed up to speak?
No, sir, no one signed up to speak.
Close the public hearing.
I move to approve.
Okay,
Second?
all right. Any further discussion? In that case, could you do the roll call, ma'am?
Yes, sir. Mr. Goodwin is absent, and Mr. Crozier,
Aye.
Mr. Frame,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
and Mr. White,
Aye.
4-0.
Thank you very much. All right, we have one more hearing to go, and that's the Orange County Real Estate Assessment Appeals Process.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, that was approval with the conditions as proposed.
Yes, ma'am.
This one, thank you.
Okay.
Yes, sorry.
It's okay.
The last public hearing this evening is to establish, the reassessment appeals process. So contained as an attachment to the proposed ordinance, is a document that outlines what we are proposing as the appeal process. This is very similar to the appeal process, that we established during the last general reassessment. With the first step being an assessor's review that can be done at any time that allows, property owners or their agent to, complete an appeal for factual errors only. The second step in the process is an administrative appeal, which is handled by the firm that, performs the general reassessment for the county. Those notices were sent out to property owners, and the administrative appeals deadline was December 4th of 2019. And then the third step is establishing the appeal deadline for the Board of Equalization, at which time staff will run the logistics for the Board of Equalization hearings and the decisions by the Board of Equalization, communicating with both the property owner and the Commissioner of the Revenue's Office, and then establishes the last step of the appeal process, which is owners or agents that don't agree with the Board of Equalization's determination are able to appeal by filing in circuit court. So what staff is asking for this evening is for you to have the public hearing to receive input from the public, and then adopt the resolution establishing the appeal process, at which time we will publish the information on the county's website and begin making the appeal forms available to the public.
Okay. Very good.
What's the, what establishes the deadline for this?
So the Code of Virginia, based on language in the Code of Virginia, the Board of Equalization is required to, or the board is required to have the public hearing to establish the appeal process for the Board of Equalization, which you all recommend appointments to, and then is established by the,
No, I was talking about the appeal deadline for the Board of Equalization.
Right,
For
so
the
the-
March 13th.
that is just a date that was selected by staff, consistent with the amount of time that we've allowed between the public hearing and the appeal deadline in past reassessment cycles. So there's really not a
I mean,
science to
So
selecting
what
that
if I
date,
wanted to
but-
make that the 31st of March, or 1st of April, or something like that? I mean, is there a time coming back from the decisions and the process for getting bills out and stuff like that?
You've appointed your Board of Equalization, they technically serve to the end of the year. So-
Right, until December 31st of 2020.
So if you wanted to move it to March 31st or April 1st, isn't gonna make any
Well,
significant difference.
And we have a certain time that we want to get the bills out and have have that done. So there needs to be some back date from when the bills are
Right, I
sent
mean,
out.
first half real estate would be due, June 5th.
And when do the bills go out?
I believe the bills go out sometime in April, but that doesn't mean that supplemental bills can't be sent if there's a reduction or even, I can't imagine, but an increase in.
Well, I got a lot of complaints about the administrative appeal in terms of the time people got their thing and the time the administrative appeal deadline was. And if a guy was gone for a week, he may have missed that. So I'd like to see
Right.
as much time as reasonably possible for the appeal deadline for the Board of Equalization. So if we could extend that to the end of the month or something like that, I would appreciate
So
that.
60 days rather than 45 days.
Yeah, I would do something like that.
I don't have a problem with that. I think March 31st.
Yeah, I'd say that I have a number of inquiries from people that missed the opportunity for the December 4th one, and so they're scrambling now looking for the next step. So I think expanding that time frame is appropriate.
Everybody okay with March 31st or whatever that is?
Yeah, it's,
Yes, and we'll come back to
And-
that after the public hearing.
Okay, all right.
March 31st, just to clarify, is a Tuesday, so.
Okay.
Okay, I just have one more comment before we do the actual public hearing, and that is that this is all the more reason to do an in-house assessment department so that, we don't have these issues going forward, and they can be more accurate, for the property owners throughout the year.
So you're in favor of doing it in-house?
Absolutely, sir.
you-
Open the public hearing. Have anyone signed up?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. We'll close the public hearing. Could I get a motion, Mr. Frame?
I would move that we would approve the real estate assessment appeals process as modified to a Board of Equalization appeal deadline of March 31st.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Simpson?
Yes, sir. Mr. White,
aye,
Mr. Crozier,
Aye.
Mr. Frame,
Aye.
Mr. Goodwin is absent, and Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
4-0.
Okay, I believe we have one item coming out of closed that we need, Ms. Thornton?
Yes, as you know, we mentioned earlier that the county at this time does not have an erosion and sediment control administrator. And I would propose that the board appoint Dan Ratzlaff, Ratzlaff, and allow me to hire him part-time to fulfill that role. So you would need to appoint him contingent on me being able to work out the part-time employment with him. He is currently in that role in Greene County full-time, and so I have talked to the county administrator and to him, and they're both okay with him doing it on a part-time basis for us in the interim. So it would be the interim erosion and sediment control administrator.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
second,
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor?
aye,
Aye.
Aye.
And I need, it passes unanimously, and I need one more
No,
motion.
no, you need two more
Oh,
motions.
two more
Another one.
motions, okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, we have been, as you know, we've been threatened with a copyright suit for a picture that was used on our tourism website. And I've been able to negotiate a settlement of that in what I view as a nuisance amount, considering the possible exposure. So what I'd like to have is a motion that authorizes me to enter into a settlement agreement for $1,000 to settle that copyright lawsuit.
Do I have a motion?
so moved,
Second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
aye.
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 And now, final motion of the
Do we
meeting.
have, did you need anything on the sheriff's deputies?
No, not yet.
We don't need anything on that,
No,
okay.
no, not yet.
adjourn.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Actually, that's not too bad.
No.
That was smart,
That was
right?
5 and 3 extra things.
Yeah, I'm just okay.
Five public hearings.